Okay, got it.
We're live. We are live,
We're
Philip.
live.
We are live. All right, welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. Darren Mitchell here, and another very special guest, all the way from this time the UK, and we're only 9 hours behind Australia. Dr. Philip Squire, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Darren, it's very kind of you to invite me. Are we allowed to talk about cricket? I know you said that this conversation could go in different directions, but we had the most fantastic cricket series, and I know you've returned the urn, but it was just great fun.
It was an
But
absolutely cracking series. And the only thing that I was really annoyed at, I couldn't get the cricket over here on the streaming services that I
okay,
normally get most sport, because the free to air, I think Channel 7 over here had the exclusive rights. So you can only watch it on free to
okay,
air TV. And I love watching sport now with no advertisements.
okay,
And it was, yes, I agree with you. It was a phenomenal series.
okay. It was.
And I think for the most part, played in the right spirit, albeit a
Yeah,
couple of
apart
exceptions.
apart from the Lord's incident, which I apologize for.
No, but I love it when the let's just say the old enemies come together, because it
Yeah,
always means there's going to be some fireworks. And certainly when you got somebody like Ben Stokes, that
yeah,
is such an attacking captain, and I reckon just a phenomenal person to watch and to look at his tactics.
he is.
It was
I
a
mean,
brilliant series.
and this, I guess we could connect this to leadership as well, because I know that we're talking about leadership, but
Yeah,
what is absolutely amazing, I think, about the transformation of the English cricket team is you've basically got pretty much the same players as we had, under the previous, brilliant leadership of Root. I mean, he's
yeah,
been an extraordinary cricketer, but you got the same players, but coming in with a completely different mindset and playing a very entertaining, aggressive kind of sport. And it's hearing some of the old timers who've been around, for many years. It's sort of almost rejuvenated by this new approach. People like Anderson and Broad, who've been in
yeah,
our team for many years, about to retire, saying, you know, I'm playing some of the best cricket of my life.
yeah.
So I think this whole sort of connection with, to leadership is something which is, I find it quite interesting, how you can transform performance through changing mindsets and so on.
Oh, absolutely. And look, we will get into the topic of today's conversation, which
Yes,
will
yeah, I'm sure.
include mindset. But as you were talking about that, and thinking, I was listening to Stuart Broad was on a recent podcast, which was recorded, I think, just leading into the Ashes. So it was leading into the first test, and he gave a
Yeah,
bit of an insight as a pretty experienced, let's just say, veteran who's coming to the end of his career. I think he's 35 or 36. And to your
yeah,
point, he was talking about how Brendan McCullum has turned the culture around. And
yeah,
I drew, when I was listening to it, I'm drawing parallels to a lot of the stuff we talk about with sales leaders and how they run sales
yeah,
teams. And that is, they know what the outcome is, they know what the goal is, but they then remove themselves from any pressure of having to achieve the goal. And they then
mm,
instead focus on the process or the game plan, or in
yeah,
his case, he used the words having fun. And he
mm,
said that the attitude that the English cricket team now has when they're playing test cricket is they're there first and foremost to entertain. So he
yeah,
said that if a player comes out and hits 2 sixes in a row, gets bowled in the third ball, instead of them getting a rap over the knuckles, they're actually celebrated when they come back into the club room saying, "Did you see that size of that six? Did you see that crowd going
mm,
absolutely nuts? Well done." And all of a sudden, the pressure now is off the players individually to
mm,
have to get the right result, and instead enjoy the process and be the best version of themselves through
mm,
that process. And I thought there was just a phenomenal attitude. And I'm thinking, if only sometimes Australia would play like that, because you see Australian cricketers, and certainly when it comes to really difficult test matches,
mm,
I think they put too much pressure on themselves and try to get things right, rather than just play, not so much play loosely, but let go a
yeah.
little bit. And what will be will be. And in most cases, the ball goes your way.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. It's a sort of fascinating, it's been fascinating to watch what happens. And you're right, it's about entertainment, but they're all competitive sportsmen. They all want to win.
Mm.
But and to have fun. And then, yeah, I mean, there's so many connections we can make, I think, on, into the topic of leadership. But yeah, no, it's been wonderful to watch, you
And I
know.
reckon the probably the one of the biggest rating sports events that have happened in recent years, certainly in Australia,
Oh, great.
was the five tests
Yeah.
over the last couple of months. So it was absolutely compelling watching. The only problem is some of us didn't get enough sleep because we were staying up far too long
Because of the
because
time
it
zone.
finished. I mean, most days, unless it was rained out, it finished at like 3 o'clock in the morning. So
Yeah.
that's one of the disadvantages, of course, living in Australia because the time difference is such a big difference. So, hey, this is I'm really looking forward to this conversation, Philip, because you are the co-founder and CEO of Consalia, which is a sales business school focusing on sales education and transformation. You also have your own podcast, which we may touch on. But it's going to be a fascinating conversation because there's a lot of salespeople out there that probably, like a lot of cricketers, maybe the English cricketers and the Australian cricketers
Mhm.
of times gone past, have so much pressure placed upon them to get the right results. So,
Yeah.
love to delve into all things sales and sales leadership, and particularly things around mindset, because I think that's one of the biggest things today around business performance and performance in
Yeah.
general is what's happening between the ears.
Mm.
But before we jump into some of those topics, love to know, and you were telling me a little bit just before we press record about I guess, the genesis of Consalia. But we'll lead
Mm.
into that. But before we get to that, love to know a little bit of your background for the listeners' information. Where does Philip come from, and what led to Philip starting up and co-founding such a wonderful
Yes.
organization?
I used to find it really difficult to answer the question, where do I come from? Because I lived my first 19 years in 8 different countries. And so where I came from was where my parents happened to live, at
Right.
the time. So um yeah, I was kind of born in Ascension Island, which is a tiny little island in the middle of the Atlantic. We then moved to Malta. We then moved to the Yemen. We then moved to Bahrain. We then moved to Sierra Leone. We then moved to Trinidad. So really, I sort of spent quite a lot of my formative years actually living in different countries. I was educated at boarding school in the UK. So from the age of 9, I was at kind of boarding school and would go back to visit my parents in different countries. And I think what that kind of upbringing sort of gives you is a certain sort of independent spirit, yet academically working within a very rigid, as it was, public school, boarding school kind of system. And the first job that I had when I left school, I didn't go to university. I went straight into the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, and hated the sort of corporate structures of the bank. Didn't last that long, and then moved into the insurance industry, which is where I started my first kind of sales role. And I was involved in B2C and B2B sales in that environment for about 4 years, and then left to join Mercury, which is an international sales training organization. It was called Mercury Goldman at the time.
Yeah.
It's now Mercury Institute. And worked with them for about 4 years before then, at the age of probably 28, going into business on my own as a sales training uh, consultant, if you like, or consultancy, working with a couple of colleagues who left Mercury at the same time. And we created this international group with partners based in 11 different countries around the world. And the genesis of Consalia, this is not Consalia. Consalia was formed in 2006. and it was born out of the failure that we had to win a large deal, and it was down to the strength of our balance sheet. And so we decided to form a joint venture with a couple of larger consulting firms that were part of this group. And this is when Consalia was formed. So we now have an office in Singapore. I was there last week, as well as the headquarters, which are based here in London, Southwest London. So that's a little bit, just a quick potted history of who I am. So I've been in sales all my life, really.
And you're moving from so were you selling sales training programs and then move from there to set up a company from Mercury? So with a few
Yeah, I mean,
people.
I was selling before I joined the consulting company. I was selling, I was, a manager of salespeople. I built up a regional office in the insurance industry, which became quite large. We had 70 or 80 people kind of within the team and region that I was running, selling both to businesses as well as to consumers. Which is where I learned how not to probably sell. It was a pretty tough environment, to be honest. But yes, when I joined the consulting firm, I was just sales, and I was focusing on smaller businesses to begin with, and then selling to larger corporates. And then I got involved in the delivery of sales training programs as well as account management.
Yep.
And I think that role has persisted right through to this day. So I'm probably, the ambassador for Consalia, responsible for certain of its key accounts globally. But also involved in doing consulting assignments occasionally with clients and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know one of the things that just reading a little bit of background on you, you talk a lot about why sales training is so short term, but sales education is more of a long term viable
Yeah.
option.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I fell into the education area, a bit by accident. So I was doing a research project for one of our clients, and they wanted us to go and interview their customers about how their customers wanted my client to sell to them. And this I was in my sort of early 40s when I was doing this research, and I met a professor at a university who said, "Why don't you turn this research into a doctorate?" And I mentioned earlier I never went to university, and I'd always wanted to go to university actually, but to do a sort of history of art degree or something completely non-business related. But no, I found it amazing that I could do a doctorate in my profession without, I could do it whilst I was working, and I really enjoyed the rigor of reflective practice that you get from doing a doctorate. And I was really surprised as well at how my clients also responded, because they were with me interested in the topic about how do customers want to be sold to by salespeople. And it kind of, a few of my clients then said, well, could you set up a master's program for us, for some of our leaders? And you hear this term, it's too academic, it's too theoretical, mentioned, quite often, or we used to hear that. And actually, seeing how some of these people responded to a formal education in a topic that they loved, and seeing how well they did in terms of completing, master's level program, made me think we've got to move into sales education as a business. I'm so sorry.
That's another client ringing you.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I thought I'd turned it off. Anyway, so yeah, this happened, in 2000 and sort of 9, 10, I suppose it was. And we had some big corporates like Sony, Wipro, HP, um, working with us to put top talent through this master's program. And then in the UK, about 5 years ago, the government set up an apprenticeship program where we were able to create undergraduate degrees, BSc degrees, and now MSc level degrees for salespeople funded from an apprenticeship levy. So we have transformed our business from just being a sales consulting business into a sales education business.
Yeah.
And what is amazing about this journey is because it's work-based learning, is the innovation and the research that you are seeing from our students now doing, projects about, how they can become better leaders or manage the business of selling in different ways. So yeah, our business is really transformed from what it was set out to be as Consalia in 2006 to where it is now as a business school. It's I think we're kind of unique in that respect globally, that there's no other business school that only focuses on sales, which is how we're now sort of positioned ourselves.
Which
So
is
that's
which is phenomenal, because when you think about and you go to talk to most people about sales and what you think
yeah,
about sales, it's a gross generalization, but most people don't have great things to say about sales or salespeople. And they think, you know
yeah,
what, I'm not in sales, never want to be in sales. I despise sales. They're all extroverted, talk with a mouthful of marbles underwater, cannot be trusted, snake oil salesman, and any other adjective or verb you want to or description you want to offer. It's fascinating though that every single person on the planet actually is in sales.
mm,
And
absolutely,
the work
yeah,
that you've done, I'd love to know a little bit more about the research that you conducted as part of your doctorate. Because you mentioned getting customers to give you, I guess, feedback or key information about how they like to be sold to.
yeah.
Because I know we'll delve into things like mindset and stuff like that. But in that research, was there anything for you at that time that was unique, or was it something you intuitively kind of knew, but it was just verified by some of your customers that you did some research with?
I think that um, I think it's a really good question because you can start off your research project with a hypothesis of what you think the answer is to a particular nutty problem that you're trying to solve, and use your research to say whether you're right or wrong. Yeah,
Yeah.
that wasn't the approach that I took. Um, I didn't go in with a hypothesis. I went in simply with a question, which is abbreviated to how do customers want to be sold to, without a hypothesis, but of course with bias, because you've been taught, you've been through multitudes of different types of sales training programs over the years, and of course the lens through which you look at the data is influenced by your experience and how you've been trained. And what I realized sort of halfway through the doctorate was how my bias was stopping me from seeing what customers were really saying. And I feel rather ashamed to share that with you because, we're taught to question, we're taught to listen, and all of that. And I thought I was a good listener and I thought I was a good questioner. But actually, I had I did this workshop with a professor from London Business School where I brought buyers and sellers together, and we looked at the data that I'd accumulated over a 2-year period of interviewing many buyers across the world, in fact. And we came up with this flip chart page summarizing what were the key learnings. And the key learnings were we need to be good at questioning, we need to be good at listening. We need to be good at this. And I thought there's absolutely nothing new here. And I almost jacked it in. I was so, and then I realized that I I had a lecture at the university talking about research techniques, and this lady asked me, Phil, what are your values? And I remember listening to the question, and I spilled off a few, like, that we often do, is sort of integrity and family orientated and whatever. And I realized I'd never seriously considered my values, and she was making a connection between values and bias. And once I started that journey, I then realized what my bias was, and I re-looked at the data through a completely different lens.
Wow.
And interestingly, that lens took me into the area of values and the values that customers are looking for from salespeople. So not to do with competence or process or methodology, but values. And I borrowed some ideas from an academic called Howard Gardner, he's quite well known around the emotional intelligence kind of field, um, linking values to mindsets. So if your values are strong enough and you live them, they become a mindset. And so this then drew me into defining the kind of, from the data that I got from the customers, well, what was the data telling me about the values and mindsets that they look for from salespeople? And I have to say that completely changed our entire approach to the way we have started to develop salespeople
Yeah.
and sales leaders as well, around, it touches upon how do you know, well, the premise is simple. If the values are right, the right behaviors will follow. So if I
Yeah.
have a value that is based on curiosity, if it's a real lived value, what am I going to do? I'm going to question and I'm going to listen.
Yeah.
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 So, yeah. So these values were, if you like, the operating system that were well defined and on top of the values that you have like apps that sit, the application sits on an operating system. But the premise that we had was, if we embed the right values, then the apps, the way people deploy their behaviors, competencies, learning is going to drive the right kind of behavior. And we had control groups going on with different clients where we took people through projects where we taught them what the values were, and we got them to express them in the way they sold and compared them with those that didn't. And that proved the ROI of going down this particular route to us. And then, the rest is history really since then. So that's a little bit the journey that I took.
Well, it's fascinating because as you're talking about you're thinking you're a great questioner and a great listener. And I often ask this of sales teams and certainly sales leaders, who here believes they're a great listener? And it's amazing how many people put their hands up. And then the follow-up question to that is, well, how do you know? And sometimes it's just a biased response to say, well, I'm a good listener because I can repeat back what the customer said. But what you were talking about there is, I guess, a skill set or a competency around questioning and listening, but then going deeper and saying, what's the underlying value that will bring out that behavior more naturally,
Yeah.
which is a completely different thing because people can be taught how to have a sales conversation. It's another thing entirely to do it intuitively because of what your value system says is the right thing to do.
That's right. And so there's so many things we could talk about what you've just kind of shared, because you've got, the a sort of common criticism that's made of traditional, if you like, sales training is, you come in, you sheep dip a group of people on how to sell in a particular methodology in a way, and how much of that do they use, even 3 months after the training. And we've
That's
got
it.
all the stats. We've got all the stats that tell us that really doesn't work. Yet it's surprising how many companies still go down that route. So yeah, you need to go deeper, and so Yeah, you're absolutely. I mean, we felt that if you can get people's mindsets and value systems, belief systems truly embedded around the mindsets that we found to be the ones that customers wanted, then you don't need to worry so much about the competence and the techniques and the methods. Let the individuals figure it out,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they'll bring their own personality into it. It's a much more authentic way of actually engaging and building a competence
Mm.
if you start with the right values and mindset. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where we got to. But it touches upon, once a value and mindset is embedded, it's sustainable. It's not like a technique. Yeah. People ask us sometimes, can you change people's values and mindsets? And of course, you're not born with a value or a mindset. You develop them as through family, through work experience. You build them over years. So of course you can change values and mindsets.
Mm.
You can't maybe change personality. That's a sort of different kind of topic. But values and mindsets you can. And just one last thing, because of course, you're touching on a topic that I'm so very passionate about. But it's culturally, it works as well, because the way in which you may develop relationships in Japan is going
Mm.
to be very different to the way you develop relationships in America or Australia or whatever.
Yeah.
But the value system still can remain the foundation. So what we found is, when we took these kind of ideas around the world, is that it was easily adopted by people from different cultures. It wasn't just another Western approach to doing stuff. You
Yeah.
can apply it quite easily across cultures. So it became, yeah, easy for us to translate that to our international clients around the world. Yeah.
So this is fascinating, and we could probably talk about this for days, because
Right.
I've come from business to business environments where the company looks external to themselves to a external provider, whether it be Miller Hyman, spin selling, whatever the case might be, and they think, well, that's the answer to our problems. We need a new selling methodology. And if I'm brutally honest, at no stage in my selling career, and certainly my sales leadership career, has any training from a professional selling perspective delved into values, beliefs, biases, mindset. They might have touched on mindset and they said, oh, well, you need to have a positive mindset and et cetera, et cetera. But it's all geared around the methodology, almost believing that the methodology is the elixir that will deliver the outcome.
Yeah, that's
And I
completely wrong.
intuitively, yeah, I intuitively knew that was incorrect, because then I would watch how every 18 months or so, the organization will bring in a new methodology, thinking that's going to be the be all and end all, that's going to change and revolutionize the way we sell. And it wasn't. They weren't dealing with the fundamental challenge, and that is getting inside people's heads and understanding
Mm,
what makes them tick and why they do what they do. So this is an awesome conversation. I'm so glad we're
mm.
talking about this, because this is the game, I believe, the values and the mindset.
Do you know what? To support again what you've just said, it's quite interesting. So we quite often host. We host sort of fairly major events, and one of the questions I remember asking at one of these events, and we had a room full of sales leaders, there, is what would you rather? Would you rather people have, the right skills and competencies, but the wrong mindset? Or would you rather people have the right mindset, but not necessarily the right skills and competencies? And, you know what the answer is to that. They all say, we'd like the right mindset. Yeah. Because you can do amazing things, like we can see with the English cricket team.
That's
know,
right.
we can see amazing things if you've got people with the right mindset. Of course, they need to have the skills and competencies. Not to say that isn't important. They need to understand the techniques and so on. But playing cricket, but mindset is really the most important. But when you start to try to codify what do we mean by that. You're quite right. Normally they mean tenacity or resilience and or whatever. And those are attributes that are important in sales, of course. But that's not how we've defined, the mindsets. We haven't defined them in those words. We've defined them through the words that customers have defined as being important. Of course, a selling team will want you to become, tenacious and resilient because you've got targets to reach.
That's it.
But if you ask a customer what values and mindsets do they expect from salespeople, they will not say resilient or tenacious. They will say other things. Yeah.
They will.
So that's what's been quite interesting. This sort of customer-led research process rather than a sales-centric sort of led sales process approach. Which of those two are going to win at the end of the day? For me, the answer has always been with a customer, working backwards rather than you working forwards, if you know what I mean.
Well, at the end of the day, when you think about it, the customer is the one that controls the dollars, right? They're the ones that are ultimately going to
They're
make
the ones,
decision.
they've got the money. So doesn't it make now the other thing to say is that when you go into the academic world, you get access to academics doing research on sales. Not that many.
Yeah.
To give you, there are 2 academic journals that are focused purely on sales. There are 150 academic journals on marketing. So sales as a research topic compared to other disciplines is tiny. Yeah. And we could talk about the reasons for that. But of the work done by sales academics, what I found when I was doing my research, again, reading all these papers, is that they've based their hypothesis of sales on interviews that they've done with salespeople about what they felt to be right or wrong. And I found that staggering, that they are spending years doing research, often on hypotheses created by, I'm a great sales guy and this is what I've done to be successful, rather than going to the customer and working your way forward. So I became quite angry about what I found as I was doing my research. I felt it's under-researched. It's not the right research. It's not the right way to go about it. And this kind of made me eventually commit my career to sales education, because I think there's a huge difference between education, sales training.
100%.
So this is,
100%. Now, I'm going to ask you about values from a customer's perspective in a minute, but there was another question as you're just talking that came up. Because one of the things that I was always really conscious of is we put our sales teams through all this great training and go and do this and prospect and overcome objections and handle, all these difficult things. How much of the training of how much of the sales education can be not just applied to sales teams and organizations selling products and services and solutions, but also to the customer side? So how much of the education is to the buyers? Because a lot of sales organizations will talk about, we are very customer centric. We are here to provide service to a customer. We place the customer in the center of everything we do. And yet when you listen to most sales leaders and also sales people speak, they talk from the perspective of their product and their service. They very rarely talk from the perspective of the customer. So how important is it to have customers involved in the education? Now, that might sound like a weird question, but
no, it's not a weird, no, it's not a weird question. So, and of course, any student, any leader or, or key account director coming through our master's program will be introduced to this notion of research. And they would have done the Miller-Hyman, they would have done, they would have had a history of doing a lot of stuff in terms of sales development. And many of them will go to their customers as a consequence of collecting evidence and data and research and involving their customers in the research project that they've defined, which is amazing, and it's collaborative. And what the feedback that we're getting from our students who engage with the customers is simply telling your customer that you are doing this leading sales transformation masters program. Would you mind if I just shared a bit my research projects with you? Is that the customers become totally interested in what it is they're trying to achieve and do, and then and really, sort of collaborating with them, because it's in their interest. It's in the customer's interest if a supplier is engaging with them in a more strategic, innovative, creative kind of way.
Yeah.
So no customers will ever turn down a request of a sales leader being invited to take part in a research project or the outputs of a paper they've written. And in some cases, they will actually be part of the final project as well. They would have contributed data and information into it and cited in the final paper. So yeah, you're merging the gap between sort of selling and buying by co-creating together kind of new insights into how to get better engagement, across key accounts or between the sales team and their buyers. So,
and when you think about it certainly from a business to business perspective, that would create, I would think, a much higher level of credibility and authenticity
yeah, it is
in the eyes of the customer when you've got a seller that is truly interested in their business and trying to find out how do we best sell to you? Well, how do we do this in a way that's not just I'm going to flog you a product, but we can do this in a business to business sort of like a trusted partnership type of an arrangement. We always talk about how do we differentiate ourselves against our competitors. That is one of the best ways to do that because you become entrenched.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think is really interesting, because we've heard about NPS scores and net promoter scores and so on as a measure of service delivery, but rarely do companies do a survey on how do the sellers sell to them in a way that they want to.
Yeah.
Yet without that, you don't have a service to deliver. So this idea of getting client feedback on how do you want us to sell to you, that simple question is a great question to ask in any kind of qualification process. How do you want us to engage with you? How do you want us to sell to you, or whatever way you want to phrase it?
Yeah.
Is a really good way of doing it, of starting a conversation. And how would you rank us in terms of innovation and insight? How are we doing? Every salesperson should want to know the answer to that question, in my view. How do you want us to sell to you? How do you want? It's such a simple question.
It is, but it's amazing how many salespeople and how many sales leaders are actually afraid to ask.
They may be frightened, but it doesn't really matter what the answer is.
No.
Only good will come of it, because keep on doing what you're doing. Actually, I hate this. I hate what you're doing in this. I mean, it's really good feedback, and you shouldn't be frightened of it. I can only see good things coming from it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it begs a question. I know there'll be sales leaders listening to this and maybe some salespeople thinking, well, so what is it that customers actually value? So if you put yourself in the shoes of a customer, based on your research, were there a consistent theme that came out in terms of the values? Because I'd like to talk about mindset as a separate thing, but from the values and how they like to be sold to, was there like a common theme that stood out in your research?
Well, I'd like to. I mean, I deliberately kind of combined the word mindsets with values, because So I'd like to keep those two words kind of connected. But yeah, there were 4 values that, you go through 5 years of research and you come up with 4 things you know, that you think can make a difference. And some of these are kind of no-brainers. And so we've got 4 what we call positive mindsets, and we've got 4 negative mindsets. So of the people that I interviewed, less than 10% of salespeople demonstrated the values that customers wanted. And
Less
that
than
was
10%.
less than 10% of
Wow.
people demonstrated the positive, differentiating values. So, going through the positive values, they were authenticity, yeah, being authentic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. It's very, it's such a simple word, yet behind that word authenticity, because we could have chosen integrity or transparency, but we chose authenticity because you've got this notion of being original, like the authentic Levi jeans. This was the first. We need to know it's you, the person we're dealing with, not
Yeah.
someone who's been through some mechanistic sales training, which we can spot a mile away. Yeah. So any kind of, dare I say it, spin selling approach where you kind of got quite manipulative questions if they're handled in the wrong way, sort of leading people through a structure. Buyers have been on spin sales training programs themselves. They know the
Yep.
game, they know they can spot it a mile away. So you've got authenticity as being number one. The second one is client centricity, which is again, it's a no-brainer. And without these two, you don't build trust.
Yeah.
And the second two after the first two, if you like, are the ones that are fun and rarest, and that's proactive creativity. So a lot of salespeople are quite creative, but it's the customer who tends to say, "Look, I got this problem. Can you help solve it?" And the salesperson is able to creatively solve it, with their team. But proactive creativity is where someone comes up with an idea that the customer hasn't necessarily thought of, and that they really value.
Yeah.
And then the final one is tactful audacity. And you've got tact, which is being respectful, it's having tact, and audacity is having courage and being bold. It's the art of knowing how far to go without going too far.
Yeah.
And you may think this is a rather surprising value or mindset, but actually customers love to be challenged in the right way. And they really respect a salesperson who's ticked the first 2 boxes. They trust you. They know that you're totally client centric, but where the seller is challenging the customer about an idea that the customer has, or even if or challenging the customer into doing something new that the customer hasn't thought of, because the salesperson is 100% convinced, because of all this data, because of their research, that this is the right thing for them. So these are the mindsets that we've found, if you like, value systems deeply rooted in the psyche of how salespeople work, that we know from the different control groups that we had will drive exceptional account relationships without a question.
Right.
And very few people demonstrate all of these mindsets.
Yeah.
And we can talk about why that is the case, but it's not possible sometimes with the way. So if you're a sales leader and you're looking at account portfolios, it's sometimes impossible for salespeople to live these mindsets with every single account because they've got too many. Yeah. So your whole territory management approach, your whole kind of sales approach, account management approach is going to influence the level at which you can live these mindsets, because it takes time to do to live these mindsets with each client all the time, whether there's a sales opportunity or not. It's something that how you manage all of those those kind of levers to get the right approach is both an art and a science, I
Yeah.
would say.
Amazing. I really like those. And as you were talking through those, they definitely resonated. I may not have used the tactful audacity, but when you're talking about the fact that respect and courage to challenge, and my own experience working with a lot of sales teams and sales leaders and certainly customers is, um, customers like to be challenged because they want to know that they're not going to be the person that dictates how everything's going to work. They want somebody who can tell them, you know what, I don't believe that is the right way to go, and this is why, and be prepared to have that conversation, which is fantastic. Um, you also mentioned four negative
Yeah.
mindsets and values as well. That I guess this is the red flag that we should try to avoid or stay away from.
Yeah. So the first one was manipulation. And so this is any sense of being manipulated into something. And the clients have got, they know when there's a pressure on a salesperson to reach a certain target. They know that the salesperson is being incentivized to push one product above another in the way that the salesperson will ask questions and not listen necessarily to the answers you're giving, but wanting to try and push people through a sales funnel, approach. So manipulation uh, was one. It The second was supplier centricity,
Yeah,
which I guess is connected a bit to manipulation. But this is just where the salesperson is very much focused on their own product and services. But also, I think with large accounts, large companies, they sometimes become arrogant. They think, well, everyone buys our product because we're the biggest and the
yeah,
best or whatever. But so you've got supplier centricity. Then you've got complacency,
yeah,
and this is where you've got a long established relationship, and you kind of an assumption that you're going to get repeat business, and customers hate it when people are complacent. And then the final one is we call it overt arrogance. It's where salespeople demonstrate in their body language, in the words that they use, sort of arrogance. Um, and there's a fine line between being tactfully audacious and arrogant. And there's a lot of subtlety between. Of course, you're in business to sell your products at the end of the day, but you're also there to serve the client. Yeah. So there's a lot of subtlety in whether you're seen to be moving to the negative to the positive.
yeah,
So
yeah.
um but no, those were the four negative mindsets that we saw.
Wow. Um, I'm just thinking about some of the clients I'm working with at the moment, and one in particular that comes to mind. One of their challenges is, well, challenges slash opportunities is one of their major competitors are totally complacent in their marketplace, which
Right.
is creating a fantastic opportunity for them.
Yeah.
The only problem that they've got right now is they've got such a small share of wallet. So they've got to try and build a level of credibility that their customers thinking that they're a legitimate competitor in the marketplace, because it's
Yeah.
easier to do business with the other complacent organization because nobody's ever been sacked by doing business with those
Yeah.
organizations. So I can see how it can be a very fine line in some
Yeah, it
cases.
can be, but I think that I remember, in fact, there's a client we were working with in Australia. They were in the software testing field and trying to get into NAB Bank
Hmm.
as a customer, and I think IBM had a managed services contract with them that made it very difficult for this new customer to get in. And NAB Bank had done this amazing campaign that became viral, which is around the breakup. I don't know if you saw that breakup campaign. So you had this breakup campaign that happened about the time that we were working with this team to try and get into the bank, And it was amazing to watch them use these mindsets to create a breakup campaign, to enable them to get into this major account.
Nice.
And it was, they produced videos, they produced all sorts of things that they did their own. They interviewed some of the bank's customers, in fact, as part of this client-centric work, and they weaved that into their value proposition. They won the contract for the software testing. So
Amazing.
it is really difficult. Sometimes, it's difficult to break in, but your client is going to work much harder at the innovation, aren't they? Because they've got everything to gain, and so, yeah, that's a big opportunity for them. Yeah,
It is, and there's an opportunity that they need to be able to grasp, because when you've got an incumbent who is complacent,
yeah,
they're going to make mistakes.
they
And
will. Yeah,
if we can then focus on, like, in this case, the four positive mindsets and positive values,
yeah,
and demonstrate that customer centricity, client centricity, authenticity, proactive creativity. Because I always talk about, you've got to try and bring insights to the table. You've got to try and bring
yeah,
something to the table that they didn't know. It could be about the industry, it could be an insight you brought about their business that says to them, we may not necessarily have a sale today, but we're planting seeds for a sale tomorrow or next week. And I'm not necessarily having to put pressure on myself to get a deal today,
yeah.
but I'm going to make progress. And if I do that in an authentic way, eventually it's going to come. Now,
It will.
easy to say,
Yeah.
difficult to do, particularly when you've got a target to hit.
Yeah, it is difficult. And then it comes down to sort of pipeline and having enough opportunities in the funnel that that some will come good and some won't. But
Yeah,
when you don't have enough pipeline, that it puts more pressure on the
yeah,
sales process. And that's when you can get some of the negative mindset kind of behavior.
yeah,
So
yeah,
again, it's a systems approach to sales performance improvement that will help drive, systems, meaning the way you target, create leads, creating enough space for salespeople
mm,
to live these mindsets is part of, I think, the job of, the coaching of a manager, in
yeah,
terms of actually sort of enabling the sales team to, you know, to 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 implement some
yeah,
of the things we've been talking about.
absolutely. Now, as you're just talking there, another question came to mind, and I'm thinking, okay, this is all, and there might be sales leaders sitting there right now listening to this and thinking, well, that's all well and good. We've got sales targets, we've got sales targets there. And Darren and Philip, you don't understand my predicament. I've got some very experienced salespeople who are very, very stuck in their ways. So the
Yeah,
question that I came up with, when, as you were talking there, was, we've, based on your research, we know what the negative and the positive values and mindsets are. What are some of, based on your experience and the work that you're doing now, what are some of the challenges that sales leaders will face and are facing? Because I'm thinking that this is more of an evolutionary process to try and instill these values and these mindsets into a
mm,
sales team, versus a revolutionary. So we're not going to flick a switch and say, right, today I'm going to be authentic and I'm going to be
yeah,
client centric. Right? Um,
yeah.
what are some of the challenges that you're finding, working with some of the big organizations that you are, in relation to these values and mindsets?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many. Sometimes when an organization is so big, it's a bit like trying to change an oil tanker's direction, and the systems and processes don't allow salespeople necessarily, the environment to be able to do it. But what I've found, and I may not have all the answers to this at all, but is that is I always go back to the customer, because I've experienced exactly, Darren, the same as you. Is how do you get um, you know very experienced salespeople, perhaps with a fixed mindset, not a growth mindset, to actually be open to the idea of change or transition in their approach?
Mm,
There's nothing stronger than the customers talking about what they like and dislike. And so, in many of the engagements we have with our clients, is we start with their customer and work back. So we take the framework of the interviews that started with the doctorate into their world and get their customers talking about, and we link it. This is how we do it. And it's very difficult to sit in a room with a customer who's saying, we hate it when people are arrogant, or you are being too complacent, or I hate it. It's very difficult for them, and this is what I want, to say, actually, that's a load of rubbish, because no one will argue with a customer. They may argue with a consultant about a theory or a practice, but you won't actually argue with a customer. So I would, if there's a cultural challenge, it's difficult to change a culture of a sales team, because culture takes time. But the starting point for us all the time is go to the customer in our case, or start there, work your way back, create a sales approach based on the customer's customer. Then you'll start to find the clues to unlocking the mindset change that you need. I'm sure we're running over time here.
Love it. Oh, we're nearly gone an hour, my friend, but that's okay. It feels like 5 minutes. But as I said, we can talk for days on this.
We
can
could,
talk
Darren.
for days.
Yeah, so interesting.
One thing I would like to ask you as we kind of bring this to a close is the mindset survey.
Yes.
And what is the mindset survey? Because I'm also intrigued how we can get people in contact with you and learning more about Consalia and particularly the mindset survey. So can you give us a little bit of information about that?
We have on our website and a free survey that anyone can undertake, where they will be able to profile themselves against the positive and negative mindsets. And there's also a limited opportunity for them to invite their customers to give feedback on them as well.
Okay.
And that's completely free, and it's on the www.consalia.com website /survey, I think it is. I'm looking at Eddie. And if organizations wanted sort of more detailed data from split by teams, regions, or whatever, then that would be a paid for service that we can provide.
Sure.
We've also got a lot of the sort of ideology and the rationale behind the mindsets in the book Selling Transformed, which was launched a couple of years ago. If people are in any way interested in the topic, they could maybe pick up a copy of the book. It's it's on Amazon and all sorts of different outlets as well. But those two sources might be of interest.
Well, I think certainly from a sales leader's point of view, always looking at how do we get more out of our sales team? How can we extract more potential out of our sales team? And I'm a firm believer that mindset, just like in elite sports, the difference that makes all the difference is the 6 inches between our ears.
Correct.
And as sales leaders, we owe it to our company, we owe it to our people, but mostly we owe it to our customers to make sure that we have people in the right mindset that are focused on the right areas, delivering the right level of value, because that's ultimately what's going to deliver sustainable success. So I will put in the notes links to your website, and I'll actually look up, make sure I've got the right one. I'll talk to Eddie if not. /survey. So that survey will enable us to do a bit of a survey against the positive and negative.
You'll get a kind of bullseye. You would be able to see where you are in correlation to what we call the winner's circle. And it will give you some insights into the profile you've created in terms of areas that you might want to look at, to improve your mindset, or, sort of ideas to be more proactively creative or tactfully audacious. So it certainly is not a bad starting point, I would say, to kind of reflect upon, where's the mindset today and how do you want to develop it moving forward.
Brilliant.
For me, the customer perspective is the most interesting, is when you get customers actually answering the same questions as you've done on yourself. And that in itself can be a very interesting point of discussion with a customer. about the difference. Well, I saw myself as being not very creative with you, but you see myself as highly creative. So that could be a conversation as well as the other way around. Where I thought I was creative, but you think I'm not. So it
Yeah,
doesn't really matter what the result is. You can really use it in an engaging way to have conversations about how you can improve your general approach to the account. So, yeah.
definitely, definitely. You know what, Philip, I was going to ask you just before we wrap, is there any last pearls of wisdom that you want to leave with the sales leaders? Now, if there is, fantastic, but what I think you just shared there was absolutely gold, because if you can get your customers to give you some feedback, it's almost a litmus test as to where we're actually sitting in relation
Yeah.
to our relationships.
I think the challenge we have with leaders that is how do you coach to the mindsets? How would you um a lot of so the challenge is if you take salespeople through this sort of mindset approach and a leader doesn't understand it or believe in it, it's not going to go anywhere at all. So the role that leaders play in sort of creating a culture of um sort of having the right mindsets is critical. And I suppose the one question that a leader could ask is, given the targets that I've got to achieve this year, what's the challenge that I'm facing? Do I need to make my current sales team more efficient in what they do, meaning that they're doing the right things, we just need to do it more effectively or efficiently? Or do I need to transform what my salespeople are doing in order to address the challenges that we have in our market today? Unless you answer that question, the answer to that question will drive very different strategies as a sales leader. So,
Absolutely.
am I trying to create a faster caterpillar, or am I trying to create a butterfly? What? And sometimes it could be the faster caterpillar, in which
Mm.
case your challenge may not be so mindset related because you're just trying to be more efficient. Whereas if it's transformation, shifting mindsets, creating a new culture, I think it's a different approach.
I think what you just touched on there, Philip, might be a bridge to maybe a follow-up
A
podcast.
fi- I know. Well,
Because we could talk about that
we could
topic for
talk about
hours.
that. Yeah, we could. No, well, that's what the great thing about sales is it's wonderfully complex when you start to peel away the layers of the
Oh,
onion and
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 it's
go into
phenomenal.
it.
Absolutely love
It's
it.
why it's such a great profession to be in. Yeah.
It is. It is. Hey, look, we are about an hour in, so I think we're gonna
Darren.
leave it there. I think
Thank you, Darren.
hey, it's been a phenomenal conversation. Greatly appreciate you coming on. You've added huge amounts of value, and I've taken a lot of notes here, and certainly going to use that in my coaching and when I'm talking to sales leaders in particular, particularly around the positive values and mindset. So, Dr. Philip Squire, thank you so much for being a
It's a
guest on the
pleasure.
podcast. And I reckon we need to have a part two where we can delve into that last topic.
It will be a great pleasure, Darren. So thank you so much. And yeah, let me know how you get on, with the mindsets. Just I'd be so intrigued to know how it works with you and your clients and so on. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, as of tomorrow, I'm gonna do the survey myself just to figure out where I'm at. Thanks, Philip.
Well,
It's been an absolute pleasure.
thanks, Darren.
Good on you.
Cheerio.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Enjoy
Bye
your
bye.
day.